Okay, that chapter was intense. The fallout from the Han raid is brutal. Modin's cold calculation to raid other tribes just to recover, abandoning immediate revenge, is pure steppe pragmatism, utterly chilling. Meanwhile, the Han are celebrating mountains of spoils, meticulously rewarding soldiers and managing logistics like a well-oiled machine, even dealing with those ridiculously high tides for their new outpost. It's the sheer contrast that gets me. Calculated Han expansion versus desperate nomad survival. And then Youfu stumbles upon the Tang Tribe, their advanced fishing, their social structure, Tang Chi's reaction to the Han gifts, especially the books. That encounter felt pivotal. Forget simple nomads, the Han just met potential rivals or complex allies. The technological and cultural gaps being revealed are staggering. This isn't just about conquest anymore. It's a collision of civilizations, and the ripple effects feel enormous. How deep does this Tang civilization run, and can the Han truly comprehend who they've just met? The Han tribe was widely popular. Who wouldn't want to learn some advanced culture? Youfu was quite pleased about this. The Han tribe's philosophy was centered on cultural export, basic education, the techniques for making brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones. If you wanted to learn, they taught openly. Unfortunately, Youfu was currently swamped, with absolutely no time to stay behind and conduct technical training. Even leaving a few technicians wasn't feasible. Still, he found their eager-to-learn attitude quite gratifying. "Chief Tang," Youfu began, "you like this stuff, don't you? No problem. We can sell you a batch to use for now. As for how to make it, we'll definitely tell you later. But we have urgent business right now and really can't afford any delays," he added. "Rest assured, we'll be back. We'll definitely return this year and next year too. When that time comes, we promise to teach you everything." Tang Chi understood. A flicker of disappointment crossed her face, but she didn't press the issue. After all, it was their first meeting. The fact that they were willing to sell things was already a show of considerable goodwill. How could she expect them to immediately hold nothing back and teach her their techniques? She recalled what Youfu had said earlier by the river, and her curiosity surged. "Friends from the Han tribe, where are you hurrying off to? Is it somewhere you absolutely must go?" Youfu smiled. There was nothing to hide about this. "We're heading to the end of the Great River, looking for a place where there's only salt water. We've been traveling for several months already, and heaven knows when we'll get there. Our rations are running low too, which is why we wanted to trade with you for some food, just so the men don't go hungry on the journey." Tang Chi nodded. After pondering for a moment, she suddenly said something startling. "I know the place you're talking about. It's not far from here, probably about another 40 sunrises journey." Youfu nearly leapt off the ground. He repeatedly confirmed the number with Tang Chi before grasping what 40 days meant. 40 days. We'll reach the end of the river, find that vast ocean of salt water. A wave of wild joy surged through Youfu, mixed with disbelief. "Are you serious?" He couldn't help but press further. "Chief Tang, how do you know about this? Have you been there yourself?" Tang Chi casually picked up a slice of bright yellow fruit, popped it into her mouth, chewed for a moment, and then slowly explained, gesturing as she spoke. "Our Tang tribe hasn't had this settlement for long, less than 20 years. We built it back then to defend against several neighboring tribes. Once the walls went up, those neighbors realized they couldn't defeat us. They had no choice but to pack up and leave, migrating downstream along the Great River to find new territory. Back then, we were still enemies and couldn't wait for them to clear out. But the next year, something strange happened. A clan from downstream suddenly came fleeing back. Their chief was particularly craven. He proactively admitted his wrongs and said he was willing to give his own life in exchange for our forgiveness, asking only that we take in his people." Tang Chi paused here, popped another piece of fruit into her mouth, and seeing Youfu still waiting eagerly for the rest of the story, continued, gesturing again. "I asked him why he'd returned. Hadn't they migrated away? The chief said they had. Traveled for several months and reached the end of the land. There, the river water all turned salty, and there was nothing but water as far as the eye could see. When summer came, demon winds would blow across the salt water, strong enough to sweep away houses, grain, livestock, even people. They had migrated there with great difficulty, only to be battered by the demon winds, and chaos erupted among them. Many clans disbanded. Some looked for other places to rebuild their homes, some admitted defeat and headed back, and others hid in the mountain valleys. It's said that the valleys have large mountains to block the wind, and the mountain spirits can suppress the demon winds. Many people went there, and now it's become a large settlement. The chief I mentioned was one of those who led his people back. He said the end of the land was all salt water, plagued by demon winds and storms in the summer. The ground near the water was nothing but sand and rocks, unsuitable for growing crops, simply no place for people to live. That's why he brought his tribe back. It took Youfu considerable effort to process Tang Chi's account, and he was startled anew. Had someone really been to the seaside the chief longed for? But listening to this description, it sounded like a disaster zone, a far cry from the blue seas and skies the chief depicted. He mulled it over carefully and noticed a discrepancy. "Chief Tang, didn't you just say it was only 40 days' journey to the seaside? How did they take several months when they migrated?" Tang Chi paused, then understood. When they first went, they didn't know the way, and they were looking for a good place to settle down, stopping and starting, wandering around. Of course, that took time. But when the clan I mentioned came back, they were determined to flee, and they knew the route by then, so they were very fast. The entire clan, old and young alike, made it back in just 40 days. Youfu had a sudden realization. So that was it. The logic held up. Besides, that was the speed traveling with families. If it were his group of strong young men focused solely on making haste, they would surely be faster. Cavalry might take a week. They were currently on sailboats. If they traveled day and night, then perhaps they could arrive in just 3 or 4 days. At this thought, a sharp glint flashed in Youfu's eyes. They were finally about to see the light at the end of the bay. "Tunnel!" Tang Chi watched Youfu, whose eyes were shining with excitement, her own face full of curiosity. Why were these Han Tribe people going to such great lengths to travel so far, to that godforsaken place? According to the clan that returned, the end of the land was utterly desolate, with nothing good to be found. She couldn't resist asking directly, "Friends from the Han Tribe, why exactly must you go to that place? And in such a hurry? Is there some treasure there that you absolutely have to obtain?" Youfu was taken aback by the question. His excitement cooled instantly as he began to choose his words carefully. After a moment's thought, he replied, "We don't know what's there either, since we've never been. But what's there isn't important. We aren't going for any particular thing. We're going for the journey itself," he added. "Besides, didn't you just say, Chief Tang, that quite a few of the people who migrated there stayed and settled down? That shows the place can't be that terrifying. There might be dangers, but we should be able to handle them." Tang Chi clearly didn't entirely believe him. If the Han tribe truly had some secret objective, they wouldn't easily reveal it. However, mindful of Youfu's promised techniques for making writing supplies, she offered a few words of caution out of goodwill, hoping these people would manage to return alive. "Friends from the Han tribe, do you know why the clan I mentioned chose to come back, instead of staying in the seaside valleys like the others?" Youfu paused, thinking, how would I know? But he played along. "That's right. Why did they come back?" "Because," Tang Chi lowered her voice, "that chief said that in the mountains at the end of the land, there are many man-eating, blue-faced monsters. Many of his tribe's people saw them with their own eyes. They always appear in groups, looking somewhat human, but covered in yellowish fur, walking on all fours like beasts and able to leap about in the trees." Youfu was startled again by this new information and quickly asked, "Are these things very large, covered in red fur, exceptionally strong, incredibly fast, and able to climb trees?" Tang Chi looked surprised, not understanding why Youfu was so agitated. Could it be they had seen similar monsters where they came from? However, Youfu's description didn't match what she had heard. She explained, "I haven't seen them myself, but everyone who has says they aren't large, definitely smaller than an adult human. If you had to compare, maybe about the size of a child. But they're incredibly fast and can leap about in the trees. They have creepy blue faces, and their cries are terrifying too. They always appear in huge swarms, never alone. Youfu breathed a sigh of relief. Good. It wasn't the kind of giant ape he'd been thinking of. Still, this news had to be relayed to the chief quickly. Perhaps the chief would know what these little blue-faced monsters were. In Youfu's mind, the chief was practically an omniscient encyclopedia. Finally, Youfu emphasized again to Tang Chi, "No monster can stop us. We have large ships. We don't even need to set foot on land. Our goal is to enter that great saltwater sea. Before that, however, we still hope the Tang Tribe can help us replenish our food supplies. We'll trade valuable goods for it." Tang Chi nodded expressionlessly and agreed. Inwardly, though, she muttered, "There's nothing at the end of the land. What can they possibly do out in the saltwater? Travel thousands of miles just to take a bath?" Of course, she knew further questions wouldn't elicit the truth. Anyway, she had given all the warnings she could. The place was dangerous. She hoped this group of foolishly bold Han tribespeople would actually make it back alive. She quite liked the idea of establishing long-term trade with this technologically advanced tribe and learning some techniques along the way. 4 double-masted sailboats carried fewer than 300 people in total. Providing rations for this number was a small matter for the Tang Tribe. They could easily afford it. However, the grain stored by the Tang Tribe was all unhulled, whether millet or wheat, requiring processing just before eating. This method allowed it to be stored for a long time, easily 4 or 5 years without issue. But this presented a problem. It was fine for daily life on land, but Youfu and his men were living on boats. Where would they pound the grain? Buying it would be useless. So Youfu asked again if they could buy hulled grain, offering more goods in exchange. If none was available, waiting an extra couple of days was also acceptable, since they weren't far from their destination anyway. Tang Chi heard this and agreed it made sense. They truly couldn't process grain on the boats, but mobilizing her tribespeople to hull grain for them wasn't something accomplished just by asking. There had to be some benefit in it for them, right? Thinking quickly, Youfu immediately said, "If Chief Tang is willing to help, I'll gift you one of our Han tribe's grain-hulling tools. It's very simple to make, but it saves a tremendous amount of effort and hulls grain much faster." "Oh, there's such a thing." Tang Chi's interest was immediately piqued. Of course. So Youfu gathered some stones and wooden sticks and simply demonstrated the working principle of the tadui, treadle-operated trip hammer. Tang Chi understood immediately and readily agreed. However, she added a condition. Since hulling the grain would take 2 or 3 days anyway, Youfu should use the time to teach them how to build this tadui. Youfu also cheerfully agreed. It was a perfect opportunity to gauge the Tang Tribe's capabilities. Over the following 3 days, Youfu indeed learned quite a bit. The Tang Tribe primarily cultivated millet and wheat and raised chickens, ducks, and pigs. They had no large livestock like cattle or horses, not even sheep, although some people kept deer about the size of sheep. In terms of metallurgy, the Tang Tribe knew how to make charcoal but couldn't construct bellows. Not even simple animal skin bags used for forcing air. Without high enough temperatures, they couldn't smelt copper into a liquid state and naturally couldn't cast bronze artifacts. Therefore, they still relied on iron tools. Early iron smelting had a lower threshold. It didn't require melting the iron into liquid. Simply heating the ore until red hot and repeatedly hammering it to remove impurities was sufficient. This was how the Tang Tribe did it, resulting in pitifully low output. Moreover, they didn't smelt iron regularly. It was more like an annual festival activity, done once after the autumn harvest. They mined their own ore, built small furnaces plastered with mud, and produced tools solely for their own use. Most of the farming implements in their homes were made this way. Their weaving technology was still at the primitive backstrap loom stage. They used spindles to twist thread, and the cloth they wove was at most half a meter wide. The primary material was cotton, which was commonly grown here by nearly every household. They also used flax fibers, but mostly for twisting ropes, weaving fishing nets, and making sacks. Their ceramics were still coarse earthenware, not yet at the level of porcelain. However, pottery production seemed somewhat centralized, although many individuals also made their own. Women would go to the riverbank to dig clay, tread it, shape the vessels, let them air dry, and then fire them in open-air piles using wheat straw. The success rate wasn't low. They had clearly figured out the process through experience. Additionally, bamboo grew near the Tang settlement, and many people used bamboo tubes as containers. 3 days later, the tadui Youfu had described was built, and the grain the Tang tribe had prepared for the Han tribe was ready. Youfu settled the account with bolts of cloth, iron pots, white paper, and ink sticks, adding some much-needed sewing supplies, especially steel needles. The Tang tribe could twist their own thread, but these tiny steel needles were truly beyond their ability to produce. The fleet had also brought white salt, but it turned out the Tang tribe had their own salt wells and were self-sufficient, so that trade item was useless. Both parties were very satisfied with the outcome of the trade. Everyone was happy. Youfu considered that he had established a friendly connection with the Tang tribe. As for future dealings with them, that would have to wait for the chief's decision upon their return. On the day of their departure, Tang Chi personally escorted Youfu outside the settlement walls. Youfu then made another request. Chief Tang, I'd like to hire a few guides, specifically some of the people you mentioned from the tribe that returned from the seaside. Would that be possible? I'll trade goods for their service. Naturally, the guides themselves will be compensated, and there will be something in it for you as well. At the main gate of the Tang tribe settlement, Youfu, accompanied by a few trusted men and the 2 newly acquired guides, cupped his hands towards Tang Chi in farewell. He then deftly paddled the small landing craft back to their own impressive large ship. The 4 double-masted sailing ships of the Long Voyage Expeditionary Group once again hoisted their sails and set forth. Weigh anchor, hoist the sails. At Youfu's command, the ship burst into activity. Sailors took their positions. Those weighing anchor grunted as they turned the capstan, while the men handling the sails chanted, "Heave ho! Heave ho!" raising the stiff sails to the top. The captain watched the small wind vane atop the mast, muttering calculations under his breath, directing sailors to adjust the sail's angle. These Chinese hard sails didn't look as fancy as Western. Soft sails, but were much easier to handle, requiring no sailors performing acrobatics climbing the masts. A few pulls on ropes from the deck did the job. Moreover, these hard sails had rows of bones, battens inside. They caught the wind incredibly effectively, making the ship faster in the same wind conditions. The most impressive part was they could make use of wind from almost any quarter. Even crosswinds could be converted into forward momentum. Such an advanced, large-capacity floating marvel left the 2 guides utterly dumbfounded. Watching the great ship ride the wind and waves, its bow cleaving through the river water, pushing aside 2 frothing white wakes with a roar, moving at astonishing speed, the 2 guides retreated fearfully, absolutely refusing to go near the edge of the deck, terrified of accidentally tumbling overboard to feed the fish with a plop. Their timid behavior prompted roaring laughter from everyone on board. The 2 guides looked at the dozens of grinning Han men around them, feeling even more spooked. Good heavens, what have these people built? Such a huge house floats on water without sinking and can hold so many people. It moves without being rowed, just blown by the wind. This must be the work of immortals, but wonder bordering on terror wasn't helpful. Youfu simply called the 2 terrified guides up to the top deck, set out a low table, and invited them for a drink to calm their nerves. Both guides were men, one old, one young. The older one was the man from the ape clan whom Tang Chi had mentioned. The younger one, about 20, called himself Tang Chi and was from Tang Chi's own clan. The 2 went barefoot onto the top deck, saw Youfu sitting cross-legged and quickly imitated him, leaning their bodies far forward, pressing their hands firmly on the low tabletop. Only then did they let out a long breath, feeling a bit more grounded. Youfu smiled at their nervousness, picked up a bamboo tube and poured rice wine for them. "Come, brothers, have a drink. Thank you for your hard work guiding us." "Not at all. Not at all. Yes, we received the cloth. It's what we should do." The two waved their hands repeatedly, but seeing Youfu insist and noting the cups held only rice soup, which smelled strangely sweet and sour, they stopped refusing. They picked up their cups and gulped the contents down. The next second, both started choking and coughing, their faces instantly turning as red as a monkey's backside. Youfu chuckled and pushed a plate of dried meat and peanuts towards them. "Slow down. Have something to eat first. I haven't had the chance to ask your names yet." Coughed. I'm from the ape clan. You can just call me Chi-Ju." The gray-haired old man coughed twice, recovered his breath, glanced at Youfu, then grabbed a piece of cured sausage and started gnawing on it. "Yutao clan. Tang Chi." The young man wasn't talkative. After giving his name, he focused on eating. "Oh, brother Tang Chi is from the same clan as Chief Tang?" Youfu was a bit surprised now. He was actually related to Tang Chi? Interesting. Could he be a spy sent along? But what kind of spy announces their affiliation so openly? That didn't make sense. "Yes, Chief Tang Chi sent me." The young man called Tang Chi was startlingly frank. "She said I've been to many places and know a lot, and that you Han tribe people would definitely find me useful." Youfu laughed inwardly. This Tang tribe chief certainly knew how to play the game. No hidden schemes, just an overt move. "I've sent the man, figure out what to do with him." But Youfu wasn't intimidated. He hadn't planned on doing anything to these guides anyway. He just wanted to learn more from the locals. "Oh, well, that's excellent." Youfu took the opportunity to ask, "A few days ago I heard your chief mention demon winds and heavy storms by the sea in summer. When exactly do they happen? If we stay for about 2 months, will we run into them?" The old man Chi-Ju was tearing and gnawing on a piece of sausage. Hearing demon wind, he seemed to recall something terrifying and immediately started waving his arms frantically. "Ayya! No, you absolutely cannot stay that long. The demon winds come around this time." "If you get there and turn right back, it might be okay. But if you stay too long, once the demon wind comes, it'll sweep people, houses, and this ship of yours right up into the sky. Nothing can escape. You absolutely mustn't stay long," the old man grew more agitated as he spoke. "Seriously, what are you going to that godforsaken place for anyway? Just take a quick look and leave if you know what's good for you. If you want to die, don't drag this old man down with you." Youfu wasn't particularly swayed by Chi-Ju's words. The old man had been to the coast, but he was far too timid. True, the winds by the sea were strong, but among the many who migrated, hadn't some stayed? This ape clan had fled back themselves and even surrendered to their enemies. They sounded like a bunch of cowards. Youfu turned his gaze to Tang Chi, wanting to hear his perspective. Tang Chi downed another cup of rice wine on his own, his cheeks even redder, before speaking. "Yes, the wind is very strong, but it doesn't blow every day. Sometimes once a year, sometimes 7 or 8 times. It's unpredictable. Before each demon wind, there's always heavy rain first, followed by a violent storm. But it lasts a day at most, then the wind stops. As long as you find shelter before the demon wind arrives, you should be fine." He paused, then added, "Besides, it's not the hottest time of year yet. The demon wind usually comes when the weather is hottest. I can't guarantee 2 months, but within 1 month you'll definitely be fine." "Oh?" Youfu was even more surprised. "Listening to you, you seem very familiar with the wind and rain there. How do you know? Have you been there too?" Tang Chi took a deep breath, poured himself another drink, sighed, and then said, "I was captured by them and only escaped back after several years. Back then, our Tang tribe was still at war. I was young then, and fooling around didn't get home in time before a battle, and was captured by the enemy. Not long after, I migrated to the seaside with that group. I lived there for 7 years, married a wife and had a child before finding a chance to escape back here. So I know things about that place." As Tang Chi spoke, he shot a sideways glance at the old man Chi and snatched the dried sheep's trotter from in front of him. Don't listen to this old fellow saying he's been there. His group only stayed at the end of the land for a year before getting scared off. He doesn't know as much as I do. Whatever you want to ask, just ask me. Oh, so that's how it is. That's excellent. Youfu quickly corrected himself. Ah, no, I mean, it's truly excellent that we could hire you two as guides. Seeing Tang Chi just casually wave the sheep's trotter in his hand, seemingly unconcerned about his past, Youfu continued asking, Right, Tang Chi. The other day I heard your chief mention blue-faced monsters in the mountains at the end of the land. What exactly are those things? Tang Chi scoffed dismissively. What blue-faced monsters? They're just a troop of omnivorous monkeys. They have unpleasant cries and scary blue skin on their faces. Otherwise, they're no different from ordinary monkeys. I've even killed two with my own hands. The meat on their legs is the tastiest, more chewy than this trotter. He gestured with the sheep's trotter, apparently mistaking it for deer. Hearing this, Youfu finally relaxed. So they were just monkeys, nothing to really worry about. He then asked about the local climate and whether there were suitable places for the ships to shelter from the wind. On this point, neither man had any good ideas. Old man Chiju repeated his usual advice. Take a quick look and run. If you can't run, go ashore and hide in a cave. This time, Tang Chi surprisingly didn't object. When it came to seeking shelter, he also recommended caves ashore. He said the mountains there were mostly rocky, with many natural caves, excellent for sheltering from wind and rain. But Youfu was looking for a place where the ships could hide. They couldn't bear to abandon their precious large ships and go ashore themselves. Besides, it wasn't feasible. If the crew was safe but the ships were lost, how would they get back without transport? They were incredibly far from the Han tribe's homeland. Whether returning to headquarters or heading to the new base on the grasslands, it would take at least a year or two to walk back, and who knew how many men would be lost along the way. After much thought, Youfu decided to play it safe. First, concentrate their efforts on rapid reconnaissance. If they hadn't finished within a month, he would send one or two ships to venture further, while the main fleet with most of the crew would head back first. Of course, the greatest assurance was Tang Chi slapping his chest and guaranteeing that he could predict the demon wind 3 days before its arrival, and could spot the signs within 10 days. With Tang Chi as their native weatherman, the safety margin for this voyage increased significantly, and Youfu felt much more at ease. The fleet traveled day and night, heading downstream with the current at great speed. This magical sight of effortlessly covering hundreds of miles a day kept the two guides, Tang Chi and Chi-Ju, in a state of constant shock. Finally, on the third morning after leaving the Tang Tribe, the great sailing ships entered a strange stretch of water. Here, the water surface showed a clear dividing line. One half was clear blue, the other murky yellow. The two currents clashed violently, yet refused to mix, forming a peculiar boundary. The Han tribesmen watched this bizarre spectacle before them, clicking their tongues in wonder. The fleet lingered for a morning in the peculiar two-toned waters where the river met the sea, then turned back upstream. They didn't go far, however, finding a convenient spot to take on fresh water before dropping anchor. The ships only had so much space, and food and drink were limited. Besides filling their bellies, they had to conserve resources. Thus, downsizing the crew became a necessary reality. Youfu's fleet had at least 70 men per ship, totaling nearly 300 across the 4 vessels. But sailing alone didn't require nearly that many people. They were the Long Voyage Expeditionary Group. Sailing was merely their mode of transport. Their main tasks were going ashore to find food, establishing contact with unfamiliar tribes, mapping territory, and scouting for resources, including population resources. This work couldn't be done by sailors alone. In modern terms, the ships also carried numerous specialists, technical experts responsible for specific tasks, not involved in sailing or general duties. But at this critical juncture, even experts had to be evaluated. Not everyone could stay for the continued exploration. Youfu selected the flagship, currently in the best condition, as the exploration vessel. Although it was an old ship built the previous year, it had carried him safely this far, and he felt confident using it. The roster for the small exploration team was finalized. Youfu himself would definitely go. High risk? So what? Returning. Alive would be a major accomplishment. He had no interest in being a local official, but who wouldn't welcome a rise in nobility rank? A higher status meant a better future for his family. Besides Youfu, there were 14 warriors. Of the 2 guides, only the younger Tang Chi was taken along. The old man Chi was too timid and fearful. He would remain with the main fleet, serving conveniently as a local informant for the personnel staying behind. The flagship's captain would personally take the helm. 4 brawny, sturdy oarsmen served multiple roles: bodyguards, cooks, and repairmen. 8 sail handlers working in teams of 4 per sail, also doubled as archers, lookouts, and skilled fishermen. Everyone was expected to be multi-talented. Even Youfu himself was responsible for writing the ship's log and charting maps. There were no idle hands. 3 days later, Youfu stood on the flagship's deck, holding a list, and began the roll call for the dozen or so men. Hull inspection and repairs done. Report, hull okay, all normal. Rudder moves smoothly, 3 compasses calibrated, anchor cable secure, oars move freely, rigging checked, 2 sets of spare sails complete. 30 inflatable bladders fully inflated, 1 landing lifeboat ready at a moment's notice. Youfu nodded with satisfaction, checked items off the list with swift strokes, and continued. How much food is left? Report, rations for 15 men. Enough for 30 days. Flour sufficient for half a year. Dried meat running low, but we can catch fish at sea, 2 fishing nets available. Also 1,000 caddies of charcoal, 60 standard barrels of fresh water, 30 jars of rice wine, 200 water pots of various sizes. At minimum consumption, enough drinking water for 15 men for 4 months, including cooking, provided the water doesn't spoil. Hearing this, Youfu's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, but he still nodded without further comment. Drinking water was a major issue at sea. He had heard the chief mention that even pure fresh water could spoil easily in wooden barrels. The far best seafaring beverage was actually beer, or perhaps low-alcohol wine, as the alcohol content helped prevent spoilage. Unfortunately, the Han tribe hadn't yet unlocked beer brewing technology, and rice wine production was insufficient, so the amount of alcoholic drink on board was pitifully small. There was no solution for now. They could only hope the water on board lasted longer, or that they got lucky finding replenishment points along the way. Checking off these items too, he asked, fruits and vegetables? Report. Combining what we gathered ourselves and what we traded for, we have about 1,000 caddies of fruits and wild vegetables. Well done. Youfu nodded, turning to the oarsmen, doubling as cooks. Eat the wild vegetables and easily. Perishable fruits first these few days. Save the longer-lasting ones for later. Don't worry, group leader. One of the cooks, nearly 30, held up a strange fruit. We learned a lot from old man Chi these past few days. We dug the vegetables ourselves, and he helped us trade for fruits with nearby tribes. The locals say these 2 types of fruit last a long time. One was a round, green-skinned fruit, crunchy to bite, with a rather tart flavor, somewhat resembling the wild apples back in Han territory. However, wild apples turned red when ripe, while this one supposedly stayed greenish-blue even when mature. Properly stored, it could last half a year, though that was for the latter half of the year. In the current summer heat, its shelf life was uncertain, but a month was definitely no problem. The other was a local specialty, hard-rinded with golden flesh that was sweet and sour, leaving a slight tingling sensation on the tongue if eaten in quantity. The locals called it dichi guo, ground thorn fruit. Tang Chi had served this to Youfu at the Tang settlement a few days prior, and many on board quite enjoyed it. If Youfu had known its name in later ages, he would have recognized it as pineapple, albeit a wild variety that was slightly smaller and tartar. Seeing the well-prepared supplies, Youfu was quite satisfied. After giving final instructions to the 3 ships staying behind, he waved his hand commandingly. Flagship set sail. In the first year since the founding of the Han Tribe era, on the morning of the 21st day of the 6th month, Youfu led 14 warriors aboard the flagship, departing from the mouth of the Liuyang River and officially sailing into the boundless blue ocean. By mid-afternoon that same day, the flagship once again reached the bay they had visited a few days earlier. Taking advantage of the remaining daylight, Youfu ordered the ship to continue under full sail. The mission objective was clear: find the sea route to Bamboo Island. Based on the Liuyang River's southeastward flow, finding Bamboo Island now meant sailing west along the coastline. Theoretically, by following the continental shelf, they would eventually encounter Bamboo Island. The direction wasn't the main issue. Youfu's primary concerns were the unpredictable sea weather and the shelf life of their freshwater supply. In late June, the sea was calm and the weather fair, with a few leisurely white clouds drifting across the vast blue sky. In the distance, sea and sky merged into one, an intoxicating blue. If not for the bright sun overhead and the ship rising and falling on the waves beneath their feet, it would be easy to lose one's spatial orientation, unable to distinguish sky from sea. A steady, gentle sea breeze evenly filled the 2 hard sails, puffing the canvas taut. The masts drove the hull forward, speeding westward. The waves were low, half a meter at most. It could be considered smooth sailing. As a result, quite a few people on board found themselves idle. For instance, the cooks, who didn't need to row when there was wind, started looking for something to do. Group leader. One of the head cooks called out to Youfu, who was standing on the upper deck gazing at the mountain range of the continent to their right. We're in the Great Sea now, but we haven't tasted any sea fish yet. How about we cast a net and try our luck? Youfu looked up at the sun, estimated the time, and agreed without much thought. Several strong men and 3 idle sailors immediately ran to the stern and began setting up the trawl net. This was also Youfu's idea. They couldn't stop the ship before nightfall, so trawling was the best way to fish while underway. The trawl net was hung behind the ship's stern. As the ship moved forward, the net dragged through the water, sweeping as it went. Only 10 minutes after deploying it, the men pulling the net felt a sudden weight. It seemed the net had caught quite a lot. They were both surprised and delighted. That was incredibly fast. Consequently, everyone on board who wasn't steering, handling sails, or keeping watch rushed over to help haul in the net. With a few coordinated heaves, a net brimming with a colorful assortment of sea fish was dragged onto the deck. More than 10 different types of fish, large and small, flopped about, gleaming silver, instantly dazzling the crew. Even the guide Tang Chi, who considered himself worldly wise, clicked his tongue in amazement, astonished that this Han tribe possessed such a skill for sweeping the sea. The sun dipped below the western horizon, painting the sky with the bloody hues of dusk. The flagship, adrift on the vast ocean, had furled its sails and dropped anchor, resting quietly. A few bamboo and paper lanterns hung from the mast, waiting to be lit as darkness fell. A strong smell of fish enveloped the entire vessel. Sailors were still engrossed in gutting and salting fish, working feverishly. Several men doubling as cooks gathered around a pile of freshly caught seafood, pointing and discussing how to get creative for the evening meal. On the open top deck, Youfu and Tang Chi stood side by side, gazing at the distant sunset, chatting idly. Tomorrow's definitely going to be a clear day, Tang Chi stated confidently, looking at the red clouds on the horizon. Oh, how can you tell? Youfu was curious. Did this kid have the ability to read the skies? We have an old saying in our tribe. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in morning, sailors take warning. Tang Chi explained casually. It means if the sky is red in the evening, the next day will be sunny, so hurry and dry things out. If the sky is red in the morning, it's definitely going to rain, so don't wander far. This was common knowledge in his tribe, hardly a secret. Hey, interesting. Youfu's interest was piqued. What other old sayings does your tribe have? Tell me more. Just then, one of the cooks, fanning the flames in a stove, pointed towards the nearby sea surface and suddenly cried out in a strange voice, "Look! There! What kind of monster is that?" Hearing him, everyone stopped their work and looked in the direction he pointed. There were only a few small whirlpools and ripples on the sea surface, nothing else. Just as people were about to laugh at the cook for seeing things, before they could turn away, a column of white water suddenly shot up from that spot, reaching 8 or 9 meters high. The water spout erupted forcefully, then crashed back down within moments, disappearing into the waves. This sudden spectacle stunned everyone. What was going on? How could the sea spout water? Hey, hey! Someone nudged the cook with an elbow, their eyes still glued to the spot where the water had spouted. What did you actually see just now? What monster? A huge, huge monster. Right under the water. That water column just now came from its mouth, the cook explained hastily. Well, what? Don't talk nonsense and scare people, someone nearby immediately retorted, their voice trembling slightly as if trying to bolster their own courage. It's almost dark, don't frighten yourself. But the cook was insistent. I'm not talking nonsense. There really is a huge thing in the water, like a giant fish. Look, it's coming out again. Indeed. This time everyone saw it clearly. The sea surface far off suddenly bulged into a small hill of water, followed immediately by the head of an enormous creature breaking the surface. The blowhole on top of its head let out a poof sound, once again spraying a thick column of water straight towards the sky. Then it sank back into the sea. The entire process was identical to the first time. An instantaneous silence fell over the ship. Everyone instinctively held their breath, afraid of startling the sea monster, their eyes wide, fixed on the behemoth not far away. Ooh, moo. After spouting water, the great fish's head submerged again. Its massive back rose slowly from the water like a small hill, followed finally by 2 enormous, horizontally oriented tail flukes. Its swimming motion was also strange. Unlike ordinary fish that swished their tails side to side, this creature moved its tail up and down. As the great fish swam, it emitted ethereal, drawn-out calls, sometimes like the echo of wind howling through a mountain valley, sometimes like the mournful lowing of an old ox in a field. Each sound seemed to penetrate the soul, making one feel insignificant, as if adrift in the boundless depths of the sea. Could this be a sea monster? Someone finally broke the silence, muttering softly. What monster? I think it's just fish, a bit bigger than usual. The sea is so vast and deep, isn't it normal to have a few large fish? Another person retorted, forcing composure. Shh, everyone be quiet. That thing is coming over. Youfu, standing on the top deck, had the best view. Seeing the huge, dark shadows swimming towards the ship, he quickly hushed the others in a low voice. It turned out that the crew had been gutting fish earlier and throwing entrails directly into the sea, attracting many smaller fish. This, underwater. Giants seemed to be drawn by these smaller fish. The great fish opened its massive mouth, wider than the ship itself, swam alongside, and took a huge gulp. Countless small fish and shrimp, along with seawater, were sucked into its mouth. The immense suction even caused the sailboat to sway. Having eaten its fill, the great fish swam under the hull to the other side, surfaced again, and puffed out the seawater, swallowing only the mouthful of fish and shrimp. The crew aboard were scared out of their wits, clinging tightly to masts and railings, their legs trembling like sieves, not daring to breathe loudly, their eyes wider than ox eyes, fixed on the behemoth below. When the great fish turned and its massive body slowly swam past the ship, the crew nearly popped their eyes out. This 20-meter-long, double-masted sailboat was only half the length of the monster. The ship's beam of over 6 meters wasn't even as wide as its mouth. Good heavens, how can such a monster exist in the sea? There aren't enough of us to even fill a gap between its teeth. Only after the great fish had completely swam away and disappeared from view did the people on board deflate like punctured balloons, letting out long sighs of relief. Despite being so close, not a single person had dared to even suggest hunting the sea monster, showing just how profound the shock delivered by the behemoth was. Not necessarily, Youfu, standing on the top deck, suddenly countered. Seeing everyone looking at him, he explained, "That fish just now was indeed ridiculously large, more than twice the size of our ship. On land, probably only a few of our chief's giant elephants combined could compare. However," he changed the subject, "that fish was simply too big, probably 30 or 40 meters long, and it swam so slowly, eating small fish and shrimp, it didn't look agile or ferocious. So, despite its size, it might not be aggressive. It's often the medium-sized creatures that bite more ferociously than dogs." The crew pondered this and realized it seemed logical. The largest land elephants looked terrifying but were actually herbivores. It was predators like wolf packs and leopards that were truly deadly. Having witnessed this deep-sea leviathan, the earlier joy of the bountiful catch was considerably diluted, replaced by a deep reverence for the sea. It seemed that while the ocean was rich in resources, it also harbored beings they couldn't afford to provoke. However, Youfu and Tang Chi, standing on the top deck, were now lost in their own thoughts. Youfu thought of their far-sighted chief. Why did the chief repeatedly emphasize building larger ships for future voyages, even finding a 40-meter ship insufficient, saying they should aim for 60, even 100 meters in the future? If they had been sailing a 100-meter giant ship today, would they have feared that big fish? Tang Chi's mind was in even greater turmoil. His initial craving for the abundant fish catch had turned into a mixture of fear and awe. The Han tribe could build such large ships, yet they were still paralyzed with fear before this sea beast. If it had been his own tribe's small, dilapidated boats, wouldn't they have become instant fish food? But watching others feast while he couldn't even get a sip of broth wasn't Tang Chi's style. Having witnessed the ocean's bounty and terror, he became even more determined to venture into the sea. But how? There seemed no other way besides using large ships like those of the Han tribe. Coming back to his senses, Tang Chi's internal calculations began furiously. "I must examine this ship closely, study it carefully. How exactly are the Han tribe's ships built? If I can figure out some key aspects, go back and learn to imitate them, then I'll be the only one in the whole Tang tribe who understands shipbuilding. Won't I gain status then? If I can lead my tribesmen to build large ships and bring back countless resources from the sea, perhaps the next chief position will be mine." The thought made Tang Chi so excited he nearly jumped on the spot. Forcibly suppressing his elation, he nonchalantly joined the group preparing dinner, intending to build good relations with the Han tribesmen and learn as much as possible. Considering the preciousness of fresh water and fuel, lavish meals couldn't be a daily affair on board. But today's catch was abundant. Everyone was in high spirits, and Youfu was generous, allowing the cooks to prepare several extra dishes. The rice was just rice, but the main courses were quite substantial. Each person got a piece of sizzling, pan-fried hairtail fish glistening with oil, plus a plate of incredibly fresh squid stir-fried with lobster. To top it off, there was a large pot of creamy, rich yellow croaker soup. It was so comforting it made people want to hum. Everyone ate until their bellies were round and content. Even Tang Chi was completely conquered by these seafood delicacies. He had never tasted before. The next day, the weather cooperated just as Tang Chi had predicted. Clear skies for miles. A salty sea breeze blew gently, and the sea surface was calm. Supplies were plentiful, and spirits were high. After everyone finished a bowl of hot seafood congee in the morning, they hoisted sails once more. Meat on board became unlimited supply. Anyone hungry or craving could grab some any time. One cooking stove was repurposed as a barbecue grill. Its charcoal fire kept burning all day. People would occasionally pick out a few appealing sea fish, toss them on the grill, and cook them until crispy outside and tender inside. The dozen or so men sailed the ship westward along the coastline, eating grilled fish and singing songs, almost like having a barbecue party on a yacht. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last. After several consecutive days of seafood, even, the most delicious lobster and abalone became tiresome. People began to miss the fruits and cured meat stored on board. Meanwhile, the flagship had covered a considerable distance riding the wind and waves, but to their left, there was still only the vast sea, with no sign of new land. This continued until the 28th day of the 6th month, their 8th day at sea. Perhaps because July was approaching, or perhaps due to the impending spring tide at the end of the month, the weather at sea began to change. The wind grew stronger, and the waves rose higher and higher. The flat-bottomed double-masted sailboat, originally designed for inland rivers, began to show signs of maladjustment to the sea conditions. Its flat bottom and shallow draft made it bounce precariously in the waves like a tumbler doll, often lifted high by a wave crest only to slam back down onto the water surface with a heavy thud, shaking people until their internal organs felt displaced. The ship's sides were also too low. A height of less than 2 meters couldn't block the surging waves. Occasionally, a large wave would crash directly over the gunwale, flooding the deck. Water quickly accumulated in the hold. Fortunately, the ship was still relatively young and sturdy, avoiding the disaster of leaks from the bottom. But no one dared to be complacent. Except for the helmsman and sail handlers, everyone else joined the bailing effort, using basins, buckets, and ladles to frantically drain the water. In the end, however, they couldn't save the precious charcoal. It all got soaked. On the night of the 28th, the wind and waves subsided slightly. Exhausted and without dry firewood, the crew couldn't even have hot water. They could only chew on cold, hard rations, gazing out at the pitch-black sea, their hearts feeling cold and heavy. On the afternoon of the 10th day since the flagship set sail, the lookout perched atop the mast yelled at the top of his lungs, "Land spotted to the port side." The sailboat had been consistently sailing west along the continental coastline to starboard. This landmass suddenly appearing to port was most likely the legendary Bamboo Island. Youfu quickly squinted in that direction. The continental coast to starboard consisted of dark rocky mountains and reefs. The newly appeared land to port, viewed from afar, was also a stretch of dark rocky mountains, along with numerous scattered small islands and black stone pillars. But judging by its extensive appearance, it was undoubtedly a sizable landmass. "Everyone hold steady," Youfu commanded in a deep voice. "Wait until we're closer. Sail handlers, mind the wind direction. Let's circle around the outside first. Those with nothing to do, get to the ship's sides and keep an eye underwater. Watch out for hidden reefs." "Aye." The crew responded in unison, immediately taking their posts and getting busy. Having drifted at sea for nearly half a month, eaten seafood until they were sick of it, encountered sea monsters, and weathered heavy winds and waves, they were now on the verge of reaching their destination. Everyone's heart pounded with excitement. Some were even already planning their first actions upon landing. The sailboat accelerated, sailors deftly adjusting the sail angles, using the wind to drive the great vessel towards the mysterious landmass. As the distance closed, the outline of the land to port became increasingly clear. Standing on the top deck alongside Youfu, Tang Chi's mouth had already formed an O of astonishment. His ingrained worldview was being mercilessly crushed, pulverized, and then painstakingly reassembled. Having grown up by the sea, Tang Chi held the deep-seated belief that they lived at the edge of the world. Beyond the edge lay an endless expanse of salt water, connecting to the sky. The fresh water from the land flowed into the salt water and eventually returned to the sky. None of that mattered now. What mattered was Tang Chi's unwavering conviction that their home was the world's edge. But now, after sailing with the Han tribe for 10 days, another new continent had appeared. It was like being slapped across the face repeatedly. The impact on Tang Chi was predictably intense. Gazing at the distant black cliffs, the dense cluster of islands and reefs, and the seemingly endless new landmass, Tang Chi's eyes grew vacant, and he began muttering nonsensically, That's another land. So there are other lands in the salt water. So that's how it is, that's how it is." You. You weren't out fishing at all. You knew all along there was another land here. You came specifically to find this new continent. Didn't you? Didn't you? Tang Chi grew increasingly agitated, his murmurs turning into obsessive rambling. Finally, he grabbed Youfu's clothes, eyes wide, demanding answers. Hearing the commotion, the others on board turned their heads in unison. Seeing Tang Chi actually daring to lay hands on Youfu, their expressions instantly turned wary. Some had already begun reaching for makeshift weapons, ready to deal with this crazed guide at any moment. Youfu, however, smiled, unconcerned. He gently pried Tang Chi's hand away, looked him straight in the eye, and said word by word, "When? Did we ever say we were out fishing? You're right, we did know about this place. From the very beginning, our goal was to find it." He paused, then added, "Well, that's not entirely accurate either. Actually, our Han tribe has been to this large island before. We still have people here, and as I told you from the start, we were just looking for a route, a waterway from the great river to this island, Tang Chi." Tang Chi was completely stunned, his mind blank, utterly unable to accept this harsh reality. 20 years of understanding shattered in an instant. His first instinct was that the Han tribe had deceived him, but carefully recalling Youfu's words, he realized with dawning horror that they seemed to be telling the truth. Fishing? That was his own wishful thinking. These people on the ship had never actually confirmed it. No wonder they had sailed straight this way. They really were heading for this island. Youfu paid no more attention to Tang Chi, who was still grappling with his existential crisis. His gaze locked onto the approaching island, hand steadying the eye. Compass, he began directing the navigation with full concentration. Southeast wind now. Both sails angled forward, left and aft right, catch the crosswind. Rudder left 3 notches, watch for underwater reefs. Look out. Scan the surroundings. See any signs of habitation ashore, find a suitable landing spot. Report. Reefs underwater 100 meters ahead. Large dark patch. Veer right, yelled one of the cooks who had been pawing at the bow, eyes glued to the water below. Hearing this, Youfu immediately looked, assessed the approximate area of the reef, and gave a decisive order. Rudder right 4 notches, avoid it. The flagship skillfully maneuvered around the dangerous area, then adjusted course again, continuing towards the island. Today was the 30th of June, the last day of the month, and the tide was at its lowest. Even the hidden bridge connecting Bamboo Island to the mainland to the northwest was exposed. Many reefs usually submerged were now showing their menacing heads. The closer they got to the island, the more cautiously the sailboat proceeded. Reluctantly, Youfu even ordered half the sails lowered to reduce speed, making it easier to dodge the underwater obstacles. The sailboat navigated the mere dozen or so kilometers with extreme difficulty. Youfu mentally gave this stretch of water a poor rating. So many hidden reefs clearly indicated it wasn't a good channel. His ship wasn't even that large. If they were to bring 100-meter giant ships here in the future, they absolutely couldn't take this route. Group leader, people sighted, on that large reef ahead, lots of people. The lookout high up on the mast, with his wide field of vision, quickly spotted the target and reported immediately to Youfu. Where? What people? Youfu instantly looked up, asking for details. Over there, the lookout pointed. Youfu followed his direction. Indeed. On a large reef platform not far from the island stood quite a few people. They were all dark and thin, but looked sturdy and strong. Almost naked, their skin deeply tanned, clearly the result of constant sun exposure. Beside them were many slender bamboo rafts and woven bamboo fish traps and baskets. Periodically, someone holding a fish spear and a stone would jump into the sea with a splash, climb back up shortly after, toss their speared fish or shrimp onto the reef for others to handle, then dive back in again, repeating this extremely inefficient fishing process. Just then, the people on the reef also spotted Youfu's group and their behemoth, freezing in place. Many who had just surfaced to hand over fish saw their companions staring fixedly in one direction and curiously turned to look as well. This glance instantly petrified them, too. In the distance, a massive man-made object was sailing towards them. It flew a huge flag, and the prominent character, Han in the center, was immediately recognizable. Yes, this group, using the reef as their base and relying on diving and spearfishing, was precisely the fishing tribe from the Yashan area on the easternmost part of Bamboo Island. The fishing tribe were also natives of Bamboo Island, under the jurisdiction of the Shin tribe. Naturally, they had heard of the Han tribe's existence, but had never had direct contact. That changed last month when Elder Zhu of the Shin tribe brought a group claiming to be the Han tribe delegation to their territory, saying a piece of nearby wasteland was being allocated for Han tribe use. Initially, the fishing tribe hadn't paid much attention to this sudden new neighbor, figuring they would each keep to themselves and not interfere with one another. Unexpectedly, the Han envoy, calling himself Shuya, was exceptionally friendly towards them. He not only visited their village bearing gifts, but also offered rare cloth for sale at low prices, and promised that once the Han tribe established themselves, they would sell them looms and teach them weaving for free. The only condition Shuya proposed was hoping for the fishing tribe's support locally. If the Han tribe needed manpower for building houses or other tasks in the future, they hoped the fishing tribe could help out. Of course, it wouldn't be for free. The Han tribe would pay labor fees with goods the fishing tribe needed. How could the fishing tribe refuse such a heaven-sent opportunity? The chief made the decision on the spot. Just providing manpower? No problem. Just ask whenever you need help. The fishing tribe is committed to helping the Han tribe. Thus, under the delegation's sugar-coated bullet offensive, the fishing tribe's first impression of the Han tribe was excellent. They saw them as a wealthy, advanced yet approachable tribe, everyone seeming very kind. Since the Han delegation set up camp nearby, members of the fishing tribe often brought their daily catch over as a comfort visit. Initially, this stemmed from simple hospitality, the idea of sharing food together. But every time the Han people would say, "Aya, brothers of the fishing tribe have it too hard. How can we take friends' things for free?" They resolutely refused to accept gifts without giving something back. So those who delivered fish always left with small return gifts, sometimes a beautiful porcelain bowl, sometimes small hair ornaments, or a sharp little knife. Recently, it seemed the delegation's initial stock of small gifts had run out, so they started exchanging Han tribe coins instead. In short, they adhered strictly to the principle of never taking friends' food for free. Encountering such principled and generous neighbors, the fishing tribe was naturally overjoyed. Exchanging their surplus seafood for useful little items, what wasn't to like? It was just that the initial supply of goods brought by the delegation was limited. Once depleted, they had to resort to exchanging with coins. At first, the fishing tribe wasn't interested in the shiny metal discs. They were pretty, but not practical. Less useful than a bowl for holding food. But Shuya told them they must keep the money safe. When the Han tribe brought more goods, later they could use the coins to trade again. The core idea was, within the Han tribe, money could buy anything. Only then did the fishing tribe begin to value the jingling coins. Through these interactions, the fishing tribe and the delegation forged a deep friendship, and their favorable opinion of the Han tribe soared. Simultaneously, through the small items and coins, they learned quite a few Han characters, the most frequently appearing Han character, becoming exceptionally familiar. At this moment, seeing the behemoth on the distant sea flying the Han flag, the fishing tribe members were both surprised and overjoyed. That was also a friend's ship. Therefore, before the dozen or so people on the sailboat could even speak, the fishing tribe members on the reef were already jumping excitedly, waving their arms and greeting Youfu's group. This strangely enthusiastic scene completely baffled the Han tribesmen on the ship. "What are they doing? Welcoming us?" one crewman asked, bewildered. "No way. Even if this is Bamboo Island, surely not everyone knows our Han tribe?" "Not necessarily. Hasn't the delegation been here for almost a year? Maybe they've met the delegation and know about us? How would I know? I've never been here. Group leader. What should we do? Those people seem to be greeting us. The lookout atop the mast also requested instructions from Youfu. Youfu pondered for a moment. We definitely need to go over. Since they recognize our ship, perhaps they have indeed met our delegation stationed on Bamboo Island. If they know the delegation, that would be perfect. They can help us. Contact our own people. However, he changed tack, we can't all go over, the risk is too great. The others nodded. They all understood the logic. It was the same tactic used for first contact during river navigation. A forlorn hope team would have to be sent to make contact this time, too. Sure enough, just as everyone was wondering who should go, Youfu directly named 4 men, ordering them back to the cabin to don their armor and clothes, take their weapons and use the landing craft to approach and negotiate with the fishing tribe members. No one objected. The landing craft required at least 2 operators. 1 rowing, 1 paddling to steer. Sending 4 men was sufficient for most situations. If 4 couldn't handle it, sending more wouldn't help either. Besides, the sailboat needed guards, and Youfu couldn't dispatch everyone. Hey, are you from the Tang Tribe? Come over quickly. They're coming? They're coming. 4 people are coming. Wow, that thing they're sitting in is amazing. 4 people fit with so much space left. If only we could use it for fishing. It could definitely hold a lot. They're here. Friends from the Tang Tribe. Are you here to deliver supplies to the delegation? On the large reef by the shore, a young leader of the fishing tribe, speaking halting, heavily accented Chinese, yelled excitedly towards the 4 men in the slowly approaching landing craft.